Welcome back to Defining Moments. I'm Suzanne Quast, and my next guest was mentioned in a previous episode when I interviewed Lindsay Morgan from The 100. She and I both studied at his acting studio, John Rosenfeld Studios. My guest is John Rosenfeld, and he has created a beautiful community of actors and developed a technique that's based on each individual actor's uniqueness. He's an actor himself, but perhaps his best part in his journey so far is that of a coach and a teacher. John not only fosters an environment that allows an artist to flourish, but also to become the best version of themselves. Today, we're going to talk about auditioning, mistakes that actors typically make, technique, and how to live a life while pursuing your artistry. Here are his moments.
Watching colors drift away.
Thank you. This is very exciting.
Right? It's so interesting. Usually, like, you're sitting on the couch, and then I'm performing.
Yeah, it's easier. I like that role.
This is awkward?
This is very awkward, yeah, but I love it.
Well, I heard you in an interview say that at the age of 15, you heard Ian McKellen do a Shakespeare monologue.
Mm-hmm.
And A, you hated Shakespeare, and B, that it took you about halfway through the monologue before you realized it was Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And that planted the seed for you to want to become an actor. And that you had, of course, twists and turns along the way, as most artists do. But I guess I'm curious, where and what moments planted the seed for you to want to become a teacher?
That's a good question. I want to say, I think the Ian McKellen was a one-man Shakespeare show, and when you hear about a one-man Shakespeare show, that just sounds really boring.
Sounds awful.
That just sounds terrible.
Yeah.
And I remember I said to my mom, I was like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. It better not be Shakespeare. If it's Shakespeare, like, we're leaving. And then we got there, and literally just said Ian McKellen, one-man Shakespeare. And I mean, how boring could it be?
Yeah.
And he got out there, and he just made it just sound. He just told stories about himself, you know, and initially he wasn't going into Shakespeare, and then he just segued into some monologue. I don't know what it was, and I didn't even notice until just certain words came out, and it was just so riveting. But as far as that transition of going into a teacher, I don't think I ever thought I want to be a teacher. Like, that didn't happen. I taught when I was in graduate school, and I really enjoyed it, but I just thought, like, I'm not going to be a teacher. I had certain prejudices against being a teacher.
What do you mean?
Well, I thought, well, you know, teachers, that means you've given up.
Got it.
I think you carry that around.
Mm-hmm.
And, but, you know, when you're young, you're just not that smart sometimes.
That's true. Or you put a judgment on something.
You put a judgment on it.
Doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, and you don't know. You like it. And also, it kind of came easy to me. And I also thought the fact that it came easy to me, even in grad school, meant that it was more just not something I should be doing. It's an odd thing. Maybe that doesn't make any sense.
No, I think it does.
But then I do remember, you know, a long time ago when I started teaching in Los Angeles to just supplement my income. And I don't know, something just clicked at some point where I just really enjoyed being in service, you know? And I remember I got to a point where I never thought about it as a profession, like, ever. But I noticed that I was learning a lot about my acting from teaching. And then I found that after teaching for a few years, I had this weird epiphany to where I realized I was really happy in my life teaching.
Wow.
And acting. And I remember I thought to myself, wow, if this is all it is, if I teach for the rest of my life and I'm still acting, like booking a few jobs, like, I had that content moment. Like, this could be.
This is good.
This is good.
Peace.
Yeah.
Huh. And then, so then you started coaching people, but then really, when did you start to craft a technique? And how did that come about? I think that's interesting for actors and also anybody out there who's in the process of creating something, to hear what your process was of creating your technique.
I think it takes a while for anybody to kind of have to crystallize their philosophy, you know, but I think, you know, when you go to graduate school, you put your teachers on a pedestal and you're like, okay, so this is what you do.
Yep.
Even though you may have these inclinations or these ideas, like, it's not wildly effective for people, you know, and you also don't trust your taste. Like you're watching acting, you're watching your teacher, who maybe you don't love, applaud someone. You're like, but that wasn't really good. Or you
Interesting.
notice that they're giving notes which seem to not resonate with the actor. And so after a while, I just started to recognize that whatever I was learning in grad school was not necessarily catering to specific actors' needs. It just seemed to be like their one philosophy was a catch-all, you know?
Yeah.
And then going to New York, I just, I left graduate school, definitely an actor who, like, here's the great thing about grad school. You spend 3 years, you're just focusing on yourself, you're thinking about your body, your voice, all these things. But you still realize that you certainly don't leave a great actor. You just are an actor who,
Which is kind of crazy.
which is kind of crazy. You spend all that money.
Great.
You're doing these plays, but you just intuitively know that you're missing something. And for me, then I went to New York and I took a lot of classes, some of which kind of resonate. You just start to, the more you get exposed to things, you start to realize what resonates with you, and also you start to look at other people and see how certain things are effective, not effective. But what I really discovered was that too often what happens with actors is, and I think it's really just because we have such a difficult time tolerating confusion. Actors really struggle. One of my teachers, Brian Norris, loves, that's the thing he preaches, is like, you've got to learn, you've got to be able to tolerate and welcome confusion, because that's where the greatest discoveries are made. But often what we do is we espouse a certain methodology or espouse a certain technique, like it's a sports team, and we just follow it because we can't tolerate thinking that all this time that we're spending on in this one studio or this one lesson, we can't tolerate that it may not serve us, it may not be the solution for us.
Yeah.
Because everybody's built differently and everybody's brain is built differently. And I think coming from a psychological background, I just started to recognize, okay, wait a second, these tools that I've learned in grad school, certain things are effective, but it's not solving the problem.
Yeah.
And when I went to LA and signed with these big reps and got a lot of opportunities, I started to really recognize, wow, what I've learned is not holding up in the real world.
Well, you work with actors obviously all the time. You're coaching them. What do you think is the biggest mistakes they make, and also the biggest barrier that prohibits them from potentially working?
That's a big question.
That's I know. It's a good question, but it's too, like...
I think there's two things. It's who are you and where are you in your life, and it's also like your process. And I think, for one, I do need actors to come into the room and really be curious about themselves. I think I always remember one actor came in and I just asked about her mom and dad, and she goes, "No, I'm not doing that." And I go, "What am I doing?" She's like, "I know what you're doing." And it was just so fascinating what prejudice she was bringing regarding like what an acting teacher's doing.
Yeah.
But it helps me for me as a teacher, to know who and how you are and like why you are, and ask a lot of questions, just see even how you respond. It's just, first of all, are actors just able to connect with me?
Yeah.
And if an actor can't just literally connect with you in a room, or is bringing in all this fear and all of this misery, first of all, they're not going to go into a room and book a job.
Yeah, you're right.
Your job is to come in and make, look at you. You're just so, this is why you have a show.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're a joy to look at and be listened to, and just and I don't mean look at like objectively.
No, I didn't take it that way.
But an actor, look, sometimes actors aren't ready for me, because I'm going to give you really honest feedback, and sometimes I'll hold back on the feedback because I know it's not going to do you any good right now.
Interesting.
Because it will throw you for a loop, or it will be too jolting. So I got to kind of holster my observations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But so it's, first of all, look, acting is all about empathy. How can I put my feet in the shoes of another human being? And to be an expert in the way another person thinks, don't you have to become an expert in the way you think?
Wow.
And it's kind of crazy to think like, oh, I'm going to become an expert in the way another person thinks, when I don't even know the way I function. I don't know about my mom and dad. I don't know why. They don't ask those questions of why. So you're saying, what mistakes do they make?
Yeah.
They keep on, when I watch actors jump from studio to studio to studio, it makes me realize that they're looking for the solution to be some sort of like methodology, rather than a solution to become an expert in themselves.
Wow. So you're saying that by being a great actor, to first master yourself.
My God,
Well, which,
yeah.
you know, and one of the things I love is that you say that being a better person also is going to coincide with being, or growing as a person is going to coincide with growing in your work. And that the walls we put up in our artistry often reflect the walls that are in our personal life.
Always.
And you give the example that if you're having trouble with intimacy in your personal life, you're most probably going to have trouble with intimacy in your, you know, in your artistry. My question to you is, what do you think you learned about the walls that you have up or your growth through your artistry?
When I would, in my first 2 weeks of, I hope I'm answering your question, but I encountered a lot of walls. In my first 2 weeks of graduate school, I was 21 or 22, and I had this wonderful teacher named Nancy Lane. And she looked at me, she pulled me aside. She's like, "You need therapy." I was like, "What?" "You need therapy."
Wow.
And I was like, "What?" And my mom's, I have nothing against therapy. My mom's a therapist, my stepfather's a therapist, my deceased stepfather was a therapist. So
You got a lot
I got a lot of
therapy.
therapy. But I was like, what is, I asked why, she goes, "You'll figure it out." She had a lot of faith in me.
Yeah.
And I went to therapy, and
So you did it. You listened to her.
right away, and I found this amazing woman. It was in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and it was fascinating. I learned something about myself. Look, I'd say I am lucky is that I had a mom who really connected with me, you know, and tried to help me process my thoughts and feelings, you know.
Which is very advanced and very, I mean, that's special.
She mirrored me, so you didn't feel like alone or isolated.
Yeah.
But there's one, someplace I'll go. But in therapy, I realized after one session, my acting got better. Because I realized something that I had, you know, as a kid, you know, my parents had gotten divorced, and I had watched, you know, they went from being, my mom was a really good mom, but then I watched them be divorced and really start to take care of themselves. Do you know what I mean? And so all of a sudden I wasn't getting attention. And I was pretty young, but I was put in a position of voyeur.
Okay.
So I made me have to like really study their behavior to figure out like, why are they not, like do my own childish psychoanalysis. And also to figure out like, what's the right time to approach them? What's the right time to talk to them? But it, you know, because you don't want to feel rejected.
Of
but
course
they
not,
were,
and you're a kid.
And you also, but I started to learn empathy for them. Oh, like my mom's single for the first time. She's just trying to figure
Some things
stuff out. You know?
She's a person who's a human being, and, you know, she's not perfect.
Right. So one thing I learned in therapy was I just started to realize that I was really kind of like a step behind my impulses because I was always studying. And so then to be in like a moment with you and just talk.
Yeah.
Just be present with you. Don't wait for the right time. So I started to I realized how hard I worked to actually make sure that I was doing it the right way. So I was kind of trying to get it right. And then just when you're paying for a therapist, you're just kind of like, you know, I'm paying you to listen to me.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to try to get it right. And then I went to class that day, and all of a sudden I felt this amazing amount of freedom. Am I answering your question?
You are.
Okay.
You are. That was something you learned about walls that you had.
Walls.
up.
And then but it still continues. It's, you know, and then a big thing for me, I noticed that when I was a nervous, you know, I kept on being asked to, as an actor, to play all these roles where I was supposed to have a lot of status. And, you know, and it really made me, and I kept on failing. I would go into rooms, and you know when you're really nervous and your shoulders start slumping forward. And I kept on defaulting to low status, and it's really hard. You can't fake high status.
You're right.
So I really had to own the reasons and explore the reasons that I was like bringing that into the room, and then also work on really building that other voice in my head, which say, what the F you're doing.
Yeah.
And to make it a practice and a constant habit to be able to walk into a room breathing in my voice. And that took, initially it's faking it, you know, but then eventually you start to find the coordination of that point of view, and it just becomes available to you.
It's like when people say you're in a bad mood, just smile anyways, and eventually.
And there's a bit of truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, okay, then therapy. You did that. I feel like most actors probably, we all as human beings could use some therapy. But also you had mentioned earlier that actors, a lot of times there's fear and doubt and that you experienced it yourself. Do you think that most actors are afraid to fail, afraid to succeed, or just that there is this fear around getting it right?
I think fear exists on so many levels. Mm-hmm. You know, at the end of the day, I think everyone feels a little bit fraudulent, right? But I am personally of the belief to where, you know, in acting classes, I want you to be able to do every genre, every type of thing. I don't want you to ever hope that a certain type of audition doesn't come in. I just think when you walk around the earth, really believing I'm prepared for anything, bring it on. I think you actually have to have that feeling. And I think actors are often not really honest with themselves that they don't actually feel that way.
Yeah.
They actually feel like it has to be a perfect day for them to be good.
Yeah.
And you don't want to feel that. Like,
No,
imagine if I taught hoping I'm having a good day.
No.
You know?
And because you don't necessarily get a million auditions every single day, that also like puts a lot less in your control because it's like, hopefully it's a good one. And then you have to wait for the next one.
Well, I learned, you know, I always remember, I don't mean to name drop, but this is,
Please.
no, but I just remember when Mahershala Ali came in and he wanted to rework a couple of scenes from the first season of House of Cards because he said he just didn't feel as specific as he could.
Okay.
And he was such a kind, generous human being.
And an amazing actor.
And amazing actor, but more than anything, he just wanted to feel good about his process. And he wanted to know why he wasn't feeling specific. And there was no benefit, like he wasn't going to reshoot it.
No.
He just wanted to wake up in the morning feeling like he didn't want to have that feeling of regret or uncertainty. He just wanted to know what he was doing. And so we helped him, and it was so lovely, you know? And I think you just watch actors bring all this ego, and ego is really fear-based.
Yeah,
when you watch
100%.
people defend their choices because they're so afraid. Like, I think there's a real, you have to own your vulnerability in that in that sense of collaboration. Sometimes we think if we need help, there's something wrong with us or we're at a deficit, rather than recognizing that if you need help, and if you know you need help, like that means you understand where you're at.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think when it comes to fear, I think we're always afraid we're going to be found out or whatever it is. But, or I also think often in consultations, and when you come in and meet me.
You do. He has a consultation with every actor that comes in.
But you just notice that they're also afraid I'm going to see something. And I think when you go into a room full of producers, I think there's this real fear that they're going to see something. And you have to take ownership for that. They're going to see that I'm unprepared. They're going to see that I don't know what I'm doing. They're going to somehow, I'm going to be discovered. So I think if you reverse engineer that, that means you've got to welcome them to see you. You've got to welcome them to see where you are in your process rather than be afraid of it.
So if they feel not prepared, then I guess I don't understand for the preparation part, then welcome the fact that you're not super prepared? Or is that then saying, you know what, I'm going to go in and be as prepared and do more work than anybody there?
I think that's a healthier way to go.
I do too.
Yeah.
And do you
I mean, when you keep on hearing someone say, like when you hear Will Smith in interviews and you hear someone like Matt Damon, and the one thing they always say is like, you will not outwork me. You know?
Yeah.
And that is something, and that's the thing, it's like I work really hard. You know, I feel like 14 hours a day.
He does. He's one of the hardest people hardest working I know.
I will always go to bed knowing that at least like I did everything I could.
Yeah.
And I think in acting, don't you want to go in there feeling I've done everything I possibly could?
When you say doing everything I possibly could, has there ever been somebody that's come in that was terrible and that like through working with you blossomed and is now on TV? And don't say their name, obviously, because that's probably not a question.
Yeah, I mean, there have definitely been, yes. I think it took some years. I'll tell you one person specifically, you know, we came up together. He was not good. And, you know, I had already become a teacher after a few years. And he asked to come over and run something with me. And I was like, oh, God, I don't know if I can. And he came over and he ran something, and he was genius.
Really?
And I literally said, I was like, what what happened?
Yeah.
I was very honest, like, what happened to your acting? And he was really honest. He goes, I just realized I didn't know what I was doing. So I changed my life. I had to turn my day job into my fun time, and I need to turn acting into my day job. And he said that he actually would get together with people, even though he was in class, he would get together with them and work for 3 to 4 hours every day. And he did that for 3 years, breaking down scripts.
Wow.
And he just made it a habit and a coordination. And he did it in the genre that he really wanted to do, which was comedy. And then he booked a pilot on his first audition. He booked the lead of a show.
So then, okay, that's actually really inspiring. But then
Yeah.
what tips would you then give to actors? Obviously work hard, but like, is there any other tangible things that you can give them that you see on a regular basis that could maybe help their career?
What kind of tips are we talking about? Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, we always say cultivate the constitution of a happy working actor. The first tip is, I think a lot of us, who are you surrounding yourself with? You've got to surround yourself with good human beings,
Yeah.
and like you have to be in the right culture. And I hope you're in a culture of like working actors who ask you to be the best version of yourselves. But then also get into a good class, and it's really about be willing to suck for a bit, be willing to struggle. But like right now, it's all about unraveling your habits. Basically getting rid of the habits that you don't need and just now start practicing the habits that you do. And the definition of practice, I love the definition of practice, to maintain or improve one's proficiency.
Okay.
And I think that right now we have to figure out a way for you to practice,
Yeah.
and then start to figure out, okay, what are the things we need to be practicing? And again, it's hard to say like, go do this.
Yeah.
I would have to see the person
Yeah,
to
of
actually
course.
identify like what are the right things for that person, because everybody's different.
Yeah. I just didn't know if like overall, like people aren't as specific. People are like,
People have a specific, I would want to
Or
say
they're-
like, watch some TV, right? Figure out, and also I think the hard thing is you got to figure out your taste. Like, what do you like? Look, it's not about, there's no right and wrong. It's like, is it interesting? Is it popping? And first of all, I want to make sure, before you do anything with acting, I just want to make sure that everyone like finds a way to like enjoy, like find a life.
yeah.
Because if you can't figure a way to pop in life, if you're not like walking around the world, like actually like celebrating yourself in some way, it's really challenging to celebrate yourself in acting.
Yeah.
Or to even know when you're popping.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're a popper.
Oh, thank you.
You are.
Love you for saying that. Thank you. All right, 2 questions and then we're wrapped. What's the most difficult decision you've had to make to fulfill your greater purpose?
Definitely starting my own studio.
Because that was like meaning that you're stopping acting for at least a period of time.
It was really taking a bet on myself and was really stepping into an unknown, and the unknown is the scariest thing.
Yep.
And I didn't know. I didn't think I was going to stop acting with that. I think I booked a guest star within like 2 weeks
course
of
you
starting
did.
the studio, and then I got a movie. I got a movie offer, but I was willing to give up the life I knew to go into a life that I didn't know, and that was, I think about that along the lines of like getting married.
Okay.
Like all these things of I don't know what it is, but I knew that whatever it was, I think there's a certain healthy fear to where I was always afraid to accept a play or to accept anything. And the fear came from, I know that once I say yes, I'm going to go all in.
Yeah.
And I know that you have to go in with kind of like a reckless abandon. And when I went into it, I didn't know if people were going to follow. I didn't even know if people wanted to hear what I had to say.
Isn't that something? You're worried. I'm going to open my doors and is anybody going to come?
And you start to realize that everything is so fear-based, and you have these worst fears. What if I'm homeless? What if like no one comes? What if?
Yeah.
And then it was just a delightful surprise that it turns out
It's amazing.
I had made an impact, and so all of a sudden people just started calling.
Speaking of making an impact, what's the legacy you want to leave behind in a couple of words?
Two words. No. I think that people just gained something. I think that people learned a little bit, learned about themselves, and I made their journey in life and acting a little easier, a little clearer, and that hopefully they got pushed into a direction with a little bit more clarity and just, understanding of themselves in the process.
Oh, well, that you're definitely doing, and I am a testament to that.
Oh,
So
proud of you.
go check out his studio if you're in LA. If not, go follow him on his Instagram. It's amazing for all artists and all actors. Thank you for coming, and thank you guys for watching.